March 22nd, 2026. A group of cavers entered the Mendip Hills in southwest England. The Mendips are not gentle caves. Beneath the quiet fields and villages, the limestone breaks into crawls, squeezes, drops, wet passages, and tight underground routes where every movement has to be controlled. A person does not simply walk through these caves. They crawl, twist, climb, slide, and sometimes force their body through spaces that barely accept them. That day, the first group moved underground with the normal rhythm of a cave trip. The cave had narrow passages, so they had to belly crawl through it. Helmet lights cut through. Knees and stomachs pressed into mud. The cave narrowed and opened again as they followed the passage deeper in. Then they reached a tight section. One member of the group entered the squeeze. He turned his shoulders and began working through it. At first, he kept moving. His chest, hips, knees, and boots all had to line up with the shape of the passage. There was no room for careless movement. Once he committed to the squeeze, the cave controlled the pace. Then, his movement stopped. He shifted his shoulder. Nothing changed. He pushed with his feet. The rock held him in place. He tried to reverse. He could not get back out. Inside the tight Mendip passage, the caver was now physically stuck. His group stayed calm. They did not yank him backward. In a tight cave squeeze, force can injure the trapped person or jam the body even harder against the rock. The team followed the correct emergency procedure and called for help. Mendip Cave Rescue was alerted. Above ground, volunteers began mobilizing. This was not a simple surface rescue. A normal ambulance crew cannot walk into a Mendip squeeze and pull someone out. Cave rescue needs people who understand confined passages, underground communication, rigging, medical support, and movement through rock where there is no spare room. The first rescue team entered the cave. They moved through the same passages the group had already crossed. Equipment bags were passed through crawls. Helmet lights moved slowly through the dark. Every rescuer had to reach the trapped man through the same difficult route that had trapped him. When they reached him, the problem became clear. He was locked in a position where normal movement no longer worked. The rescuers had to solve the squeeze carefully. They checked his condition, spoke to him, controlled the pace, and worked on the exact angle of his body. A shoulder had to shift, his hips had to clear, his breathing had to stay controlled. The rescue was now a problem of centimeters. The first attempt did not end it. The team adjusted him, paused, checked his breathing, and tried again. The cave only allowed tiny changes. A rescuer near his head kept him focused while others worked around his shoulders and hips. Equipment had to be passed in slowly because the passage had no working space. Every new movement needed another stop, another check, another careful instruction. Hours passed. Then, while that first man was still underground, another call came in. A second spelunker, in the same Mendip area, had suffered a leg injury and was trapped now. He lost his grip falling down a narrow chute and could not get up on his own. Now the team was no longer handling one emergency. They were handling two. One was wedged in a tight passage. Another was injured underground and unable to exit. More than 40 volunteer rescuers became involved across both incidents. Extra Mendip members and Gloucester Cave Rescue Group were placed on standby. Command had to split attention, people, and equipment without allowing either rescue to lose momentum. Back inside the first incident scene, the trapped man remained in the squeeze. The rescuers continued working him free slowly. They could not pull hard. They could not rush. They adjusted his body piece by piece, guiding him through the same narrow rock that had stopped him. At the same time, another team moved toward the second casualty. The second rescue team reached him and checked his condition. This second spelunker had a leg injury, which created a different kind of problem. He was not stuck in a squeeze, but he still could not simply walk out. In a cave, an injured leg turns every crawl, climb, slope, and drop into an obstacle. A route that feels normal on the way in becomes brutal on the way out when one person cannot use his leg properly. They had to prepare him for evacuation without making the injury worse. Every movement had to protect the leg. The rescuers had to decide how to move him through the cave safely, section by section. The evacuation did not begin as one clean carry. The team first had to secure him, protect the injured leg, and move him only when the next section was ready. A crawl became a slow drag. Back in the first scene, the squeeze rescue continued. The team applied lubricants and widened up the gap with chisels so that there was enough space to pull through. The trapped man's body finally began to move, not all at once. A small shift first, then another. The rescuers adjusted his angle again. His shoulder cleared, his hips moved. The passage that had locked around him began to release him. After hours of careful work, he was freed from the tight section. But freedom from the squeeze did not mean the rescue was finished. He still had to get out of the cave after spending hours trapped in one position. He was tired, cold, and drained. Rescuers escorted him through the remaining passages and guided him toward the surface. While that was happening, the second rescue was still unfolding. The injured man was being moved out. Rescuers had to help him through the cave without turning the injury into something worse. Some sections demanded support. Others demanded controlled lifting or careful positioning. The team moved him through the underground route with patience, keeping the evacuation steady. By then, both incidents had turned into long, exhausting underground operations. In one cave, every inch of progress depended on freeing the man from the squeeze and then guiding him back through the same narrow route. In the other cave, every step depended on protecting the injured leg while moving through uneven rock. Neither team had a straight path out. They solved one section, then faced the next. That is why the hours kept building. The two rescues now ran side by side. In one place, rescuers were bringing out the man who had been stuck in the squeeze. In another, rescuers were evacuating the man with the injured leg. Above ground, command had to track both operations. Teams moved in and out. Equipment went where it was needed. Volunteers rotated through the work. The day had turned into one of those rare rescue situations where the same cave rescue organization had to manage two underground emergencies at the same time. The first rescue lasted around 12 hours. The trapped caver was finally brought out safely. The second rescue took more than 7 hours. The injured caver was also brought out safely. Both men survived. One man trapped by rock, one man trapped by injury. Two separate underground rescues, more than 40 volunteers, all on the same day beneath the Mendip Hills. On Saturday, January 10th, 2026, 3 cavers entered the Svajna Studna cave near Rudici, in the Moravian karst of the Czech Republic. They were not tourists. They were experienced speleologists, the kind of people who do not enter caves for a quick adventure, but to read them. They understood how passages breathe, how cold air can hint at hidden chambers, how small changes in temperature can reveal that somewhere beyond a wall of stone, a deeper void may exist. One of them was 45-year-old Václav Adamek. That morning, the plan was controlled and technical. The team was surveying the cave system and checking possible airflow routes underground. In cave exploration, this kind of work can seem almost invisible from the surface. There is no dramatic entrance, no huge open chamber, no obvious danger at first. Just men moving through darkness, checking narrow passages, reading air, and following the shape of the rock. But caves do not need a spectacular collapse to become dangerous. Sometimes all it takes is one bad step. The team moved deeper into the system, passing through tight corridors where the body had to adjust to the cave instead of the cave adjusting to the body. The walls narrowed, the ground tilted, the route dropped farther below the surface. Every movement required balance. Every handhold mattered. Every shift of weight had to be deliberate. At around 85 meters underground, roughly 300 meters from the entrance, Adamek reached a sloped section of passage. It was not the kind of place where a mistake looks dramatic from the outside. It was not a cliff. It was not a roaring underground river. It was a narrow underground route where the floor, the body, and the rock all forced movement into a small, controlled space. Then, his foot slipped. In one instant, the cave trip changed completely. His leg gave way beneath him, and the injury was immediate. The kind of injury a person understands before anyone says anything. A deep, brutal fracture. The lower leg no longer behaving like a leg. Pain shooting through the body with every attempted movement. In the darkness, far underground, Adamek knew the situation had become serious. But the worst part was not only the break, it was where it happened. Inside a cave like Svajna Studna, rescue is not as simple as reaching the injured person and carrying him out. On the surface, a broken leg is a medical emergency. Underground, in a narrow cave, it becomes a logistical trap. The injured caver's not just hurt. He is now deep inside a route that was difficult even for healthy people to move through. The passages around him were so tight that normal rescue methods could not work. There was no room for a team to stand around him. No open corridor where rescuers could simply lift a stretcher and walk. No clean route where he could be carried out like a patient in a hallway. The cave allowed one body through at a time, and now that body had a shattered leg. One teammate stayed with Adamek underground. The other began the long journey back toward the entrance to call for help. That climb out would have been heavy with urgency. Every meter mattered. Every squeeze, every climb, every narrow section had to be crossed with the knowledge that, behind him, deep in the cave, his friend was injured and waiting. At 12:20 p.m., the emergency call came in. Above ground, the rescue operation began forming. Firefighters, cave rescuers, medical specialists, rope technicians, and blasting experts started moving toward the Moravian karst. This was not a normal rescue. The first challenge was not only reaching Adamek, it was figuring out whether the cave itself would allow him to be removed at all. Underground, Adamek remained conscious. That mattered. In many cave rescues, the injured person becomes passive. The rescuers do everything. They package the patient, pull the stretcher, lift, drag, and carry. But here, the cave did not give them that option. The passages were too narrow for free movement. As you can see from real rescue footage of the incident, there were sections where rescuers could not surround him. There was no space for clean teamwork in the way rescue teams prefer. The cave forced the rescue into something slower and more personal. Adamek would have to help. He would have to use his own strength. But he was trapped in the worst possible situation. Alive, conscious, hurt, deep underground, able to understand everything, but unable to just stand up and leave. As the rescue teams assessed the cave, the scale of the problem became clear. The stretcher route was not usable. The passages would have to be changed. The rescuers were not just going to move through the cave. They were going to have to reshape it. Blasting specialists were brought in. That detail alone tells you how serious the situation had become. Controlled charges were prepared underground, not to open a dramatic new tunnel, but to widen narrow sections just enough for a wounded man to pass. This is one of the most dangerous and delicate kinds of rescue work. Too much force, and the cave becomes unstable. Too little, and nothing changes. Every blast had to be small, calculated, and controlled. For hours, rescuers worked inside the cave. Adamek was still underground, still waiting, still injured, still inside a cold, confined space where time moves differently. A doctor from the cave rescue side stayed involved with him. Rescuers set up heated areas underground to prevent the cold from becoming another enemy. Pain, shock, exhaustion, and temperature all had to be managed while the route was being made passable. And above all of it was the cave itself. For nearly 15 hours, rescuers worked to prepare the exit route, one blast after another. By around 2:10 a.m. on Sunday, the worst of the access work had been completed. The cave had been widened enough for the extraction to begin. But that did not mean the rescue was nearly over. It meant the hardest part was finally allowed to start. Around 2:30 a.m., the first extraction team entered the cave. At about 3:20 a.m., Adamek was prepared for transport. His injured leg had to be protected. His body had to be secured. The rescuers had to balance medical safety with the brutal reality of the passage. In an open space, you immobilize, lift, and carry. In Svajna Studna, they had to do that while fighting stone. At 4:35 a.m., they began moving him out. Progress was slow, painfully slow. The team could not rush. A sudden pull could worsen the injury. A wrong angle could trap the stretcher. The entire extraction became a battle of inches. Move, stop, adjust, breathe, shift, continue. And through the tightest parts, Adamek had to stay active. He had to use what strength he still had. Imagine being there. The darkness broken by helmet lights. Cold stone inches from your face. Your broken legs secured but still sending pain through your body. Rescuers around you, calm but intensely focused. A passage ahead that looks too narrow. And the knowledge that the surface is still hundreds of meters away. By 7:15 a.m., the team had brought him about halfway out. They worked through the passages they had widened. They managed the stretcher. They helped Adamek through the spaces where the cave resisted them. Then, at 8:26 a.m. on Sunday, January 11th, Václav Adamek reached the surface. After more than 20 hours underground, he was finally handed over to emergency medical services. The rescue was over.